Hello and welcome to The Ripple Impact, the podcast where we dive into those fascinating small moments, big decisions, and unexpected ripples that create waves of change in brands, business, leadership, and in life. I'm Laura Barber, founder of The Ripple Impact, where we help businesses turn human stories into brand growth. After 20 years inside global giants like PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, I've seen just how powerful storytelling can be when it's rooted in real human stories. Each week, I sit down with bold thinkers, founders, and wavemaker guests to explore the pivotal ripples that shaped their journey and the lessons you can take to transform your brand, your business, or your career. Today, I'm joined by someone whose work is all about bridging worlds of language, leadership, and culture. Victoria Rennoldson is the founder of Culture Cuppa, a global communication coach and the author of up-and-coming book, Becoming a Global Leader, launching next week. Her work helps leaders and teams connect across culture, build confidence, and communicate with meaning in an increasingly global world. But behind that mission lies a fascinating story of roots, resilience, reinvention, and rediscovering what it means to truly connect as humans. Victoria, welcome to the Ripple Impact Show. Absolute joy to have you here. I had the pleasure of being on your podcast, and now you're joining my podcast. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, a massive thank you to you, Laura. And I really appreciate you inviting me on the show. And I'm really excited to be sharing my story and a little bit about my own journey with roots and resilience and reinvention, as you said.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here today. You've talked before about your love of language actually starting really young, and you're fascinated with words and sounds and how people connect. Can you take us back to those early ripple moments in your childhood when you first realized that communication was so much more than words?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the idea of communication and culture and how important it was in the world really came from my earliest days in childhood, when I realized that my grandparents, who were, one was Austrian, the other Hungarian, they were speaking English with a different accent. They were speaking in a different way. They didn't have quite the same phrases and way of speaking. And it really struck me that as I grew older, that they were speaking English as their second language. But my dad was actually very, very English. They had raised him in a household where they didn't speak any other languages. They changed the surname. So for those of you who knew me back in the days of working with Laura, I was Victoria Swing back then, but that was an invented surname that they had created from a very German sounding surname. And so it struck me, even in those early days, that language was something important for connecting people, for the way that they evolved and grew up. And even though my dad didn't have that connection to the language, the culture, because they had decided that he was going to be very English, I got very fascinated in words and language from my earliest days of learning languages. So languages were absolutely my path, and I absolutely adored languages, from learning French and German at school, ancient languages like Latin, and then later on when I started learning Russian at university and decided to look at German and Russian as my core languages. But the thing that really struck me was when I was living in those countries, and I went as part of my studies to live and work and study in both Germany and Russia. One of the things that came home to me was how much it didn't matter how many words I knew or how perfect my grammar was or how perfectly I said it. In reality, what people were saying to me was sometimes different, because that was influenced from their own cultural backgrounds, from where they were from, with the city they were from in Russia or Germany. They had different accents that I didn't always understand, even though I was quite fluent in those languages by that point. And the way people said things was completely different as well, from making requests to saying no. And that was really a moment in time for me through that journey of learning languages when it landed. Actually, communication is more than just words. It's more than just language. And this is where you really have to build in the cultural understanding and insight to really, truly understand communication.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. This idea that you can read it in a textbook and you look and learn words and structure and grammar and orders, but you can't learn culture in the same way that you can when you really live it and experience, and you know where that individual is coming from, literally and metaphorically, to really understand what they're saying and the nuance and the beauty in language is more than just words. That is such an incredible thought. And this idea that it's felt, not just
Yeah.
spoken, that's really, really powerful. When did you start to notice this thread between connection and culture? Was it when you lived in these countries and when you really experienced it? And is that what shaped your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, when I living in those countries made me recognize that the way people express themselves and the way that they connected was different from country to country, culture to culture. And so even in moments around, I remember quite specifically asking somebody a question, something like, would you like me to get you a tea? And I was literally translating word by word how you would say that. But they turned around to me and said, that's really weird. Why are you saying it like that? We don't say it. We say it, the equivalent in, if I transliterate it, is almost like, give me tea, with no please, no thank you, no would you, could you. And that kind of idea really got to me, that communication is cultural. You have to understand that's not rude. That's not somebody trying to be demanding, but actually the way they're expressing themselves is appropriate to that culture. So that was really an interesting idea to me. But that idea really got me fascinated in this thought of, what does that look like in the world of work? And so although my first career, which was in marketing, which is when we first met, although my first career on the surface didn't look like it had anything to do with this cultural communication, in fact, I naturally gravitated towards global organizations. And I absolutely loved not only understanding consumers in those different markets and how things were, from how people, their eating habits or how they like to shop, but even just how shops were laid out and why they were laid out like that, and how people understood the communication we were putting out as a marketing team. This fascinated me. So that thread continued for me as I moved into my marketing career.
Yeah. And what was it about marketing that took you in there in the first place? Was it the storytelling and the language and the culture? Or did the love and the passion of those things merge over time as you experienced, as you said, local consumer insights and local knowledge? Is it something you always knew you wanted to do? Or did it naturally evolve as a passion that you would just happen to be really good at?
Absolutely not. Like, I'll be very honest, as a sort of somebody who was coming out of university with a languages degree, but knowing that my path wasn't actually naturally teaching or translating or interpreting, I was struggling to think, okay, what do I do here? And my game plan at that point was, okay, let's get some experience. Marketing seems interesting. I don't know much about it. So I was probably quite naive. I didn't really plan it or think about it. But I got incredibly lucky in my early career. So I ended up starting at Boots, which is big retailer healthcare company. Back in those days, they had a healthcare branded business, including Nurofen and Strepsils and E45. And I worked in that part of the business for most of my time there. And I had the opportunity to do some amazing work with teams across Germany, France, Spain, and Russia. So as a Russian speaker, and actually quite young, but I had the amazing opportunity to go out to Russia, to Moscow, St. Petersburg, Novosibirsk in Siberia, and really experience the realities of the market and meet consumers, hear their stories. So that idea of marketing and the idea of communication and how it fitted into my passions actually evolved over time. It wasn't really planned that way. But for sure, what really struck me as I was going through that career was clearly communication is a critical part of that marketing, not only externally to consumers, but also internally. And that's the bit that also got me very fascinated. Why do people say things the way they did? Why was it in that meeting that person didn't say anything, even though afterwards they told me they didn't agree with it? Why was it that there were disagreements and things didn't go to plan when you were swapping emails? And that's the bit that got me really interested. And I was spending more time thinking about this as I went through my journey in marketing, which is probably the thread and the origin, which actually then brought me to my business today and what I do
Yeah.
in my current iteration.
Yeah, amazing, because there's so many layers of what you've just said that are so pivotal and part of what you do today, from going into individual markets and getting really close to the consumer. That's all about deep listening and understanding the cultural nuance and meeting people where they are to really understand how you can meet their needs and how you can position a product or build advertising or innovation that is really targeted and nuanced to different consumers, different cultures, different moments. Having that real proximity to the language and the challenge and the issues and the consumers is so rich and so powerful. And this element of deep listening to then be able to communicate really powerfully is such a wonderful thought. And then, as you said, the internal communication of how arguably businesses work and how decisions get made and how those stakeholder relationships work or don't, and the
Yes.
nuance and the politics and the language, and especially in global organizations, because you've worked in many different organizations that have European and global structures. That interconnection of people around the world is so pivotal to how business works and how arguably things get done, and communication being such a central part of that. How amazing to go from a childhood passion of language and learning to then applying that into marketing and strategy and internal communication.
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head when you talked about this idea of, it's also really interesting then in these moments to observe what is it that makes the communication flow and what doesn't actually. Where is the friction? Where are those moments where the communication is not happening? Well, the words are happening, but the connection is not. And that was really interesting to me, because this is rolling back. So I left marketing now, gosh, it's over 10 years ago now. And I had worked for some really large organizations. I started at Boots. I ended up working at Heinz, Premier Foods, and then eventually General Mills, where we met. At that time, we were really having the opportunities to travel quite regularly, to meet people, to create that connection face to face. Not clearly every week. And clearly there was a lot that had to happen virtually as well. But there were many more touch points where people could come together, have that connection, have the conversations, and understand each other better. And so if I fast forward to what I do now in the global leadership space, what is fascinating to me now is that we need to still create that connection. In fact, it's even more critical than ever. But those opportunities to come together face to face to build that connection in that way, it's not the same as it was back then. And even back then, it was challenging to create that connection in the first place.
Yeah. And 10 years since you took that leap. I don't want to brush over that, because that is such a massive leap for you and your husband at the same time, to take the leap from corporate to setting up your own business. Can you tell us that story? Because you've said it's not a brave one, but I certainly think it is. Tell us the story.
Yeah. So I'd been in marketing for 12 years when I ended up leaving. And it came about because initially there was a different path that was opening up in front of us. I had a very young child at the time. My husband had an opportunity to relocate. He was a consultant, and we were looking at moving to Boston in the US. And I had got to a point where I was thinking, well, this could be quite interesting, a different opportunity, perhaps a little bit of a pause. Let's work out what's next in my marketing career. But actually what happened in the end was we had planned it. We were ready to go explore the city, work out where we're going to live, all of that jazz. And I had already left my role in marketing. I decided that, particularly with my son being very young, he was just about a year old at that point, that I needed a bit of time to help with the planning and think about this. And my husband came home one day and he said, I can't do this actually. Okay, what you mean, move to Boston? Okay, well, all right, well, let's have a look at some other options then. And he said, no, I can't be a consultant anymore. I can't do this. It doesn't light me up. It doesn't fire me up. This is not my way. This is not what I'm meant to be doing. Now, this was when he came back for that conversation. I didn't know at the time, I was already pregnant with our second child. We had planned to move. We were already underway with those conversations. So we had to slightly unravel, obviously, what had been planned. But it also, for me personally put a real kind of moment in front of me, which was, what am I going to do here? What is my way forward here? And interestingly, at that time, didn't feel like the right answer to that was to go backwards towards marketing. I felt this idea that had been in my head for such a long time, the idea of communication, culture, what I observed in global organizations and teams, how I saw those cultural nuances playing out. I felt there was something there and I wanted to be part of that.
Yeah.
And that meant, therefore, I had to step forward and step into setting up my own thing, my own business. Now, that wasn't a natural step for me at all. In fact, when I've been in my corporate career, always thought I'd be part of large organizations. I'd always thought my career would be some form of structured path that would lead towards a certain point. So to have no roadmap, to have no idea of where ultimately this was going to lead, but just something in my heart that said, I think I can help in this way. There's something I can do here and I can help others with. That was the origin. That was the genesis of it all. And that was my story. And then on the other side, very briefly with my husband, he then went and did something completely different as well. So having been in strategy, finance, consulting his whole life, he went and trained as a chef for a year and wanted to go back to his passion, which was food, and which is how he ended up in his business today, running a pasta business. But two very different outcomes. I don't think either of us could have predicted that. It's interesting. I remember when we had the conversation, you said, did it feel brave to do that?
Yeah.
It felt slightly foolhardy at the time. It felt slightly crazy because I was pregnant. We had a kid already. We had a mortgage. We had all of those things going on around a life that we thought we were going to be leading.
Yeah.
But where we came back to for both of us was just this real sense of we trust ourselves and we trust each other. And we truly, truly believe that we can find a way through. Even if the initial idea doesn't work, there's going to be a path for both of us and we can work it out.
Yeah. Oh, I just love the idea of you both trusting yourselves and each other in that moment. Because, wow, to make such a life change to we're moving to Boston and we're going to plan that and this is happening to then actually, no, we're going to both pivot, both at the same time. We're not going to move. I'm pregnant with my second child. Everything changes all at the same time. That element of trust is so incredible. But also, I love the thought of you both going back ultimately to your passions and your purpose, which is communication and culture, and for him around food and the joy of food and starting something there. So what a crazy serendipitous moment that actually has led you both to the paths that you're on today. And I know you said that it didn't feel brave, and you know when we chatted before, you were saying it just felt obvious, but wow, such bravery to do that and to commit to a completely new pathway and new beginnings.
Yeah. And that's the thing, that at the time, it felt like all we had to do was work out the first few steps.
Yeah.
So if I'm deeply honest with you, actually, there was no like grand, ultimate big vision or big plan of this is ultimately what we want to create, either of us. But there was that sense of this is what drives me. This is what is important to me. I feel that I can help people in this way. There is something that I can give to people through this work. And it felt so obvious to me when I then looked back at my life and what had driven me to that point, that it was absolutely about those paths coming together. And that was where it was like, okay, I don't need to know everything, but I will take those first few steps and let that unfold. And that wasn't always comfortable. I'll be also honest with you, because as somebody who had always had things quite structured, the way I used to work was I am still quite a planner in some ways, but I'm more flexible these days. But I used to be a real planner, and uncertainty didn't always feel comfortable with me. So this was quite a shift to be in very different mode, to be having been part of really large global organizations and teams and knowing how to get things done, to it's me. It's down to me to make this happen. And of course, over time, I've been running this business for 10 years now. I've been able to scale and be able to get support behind me. But at the beginning, it's you by yourself. So you have to really trust yourself and believe that you will find the answer, that you will move forward. And of course, as I've done that, then you can start to see further out and start to develop that big idea.
And such a lovely lesson and reassurance, I'm sure, for many people that want to start their own thing and maybe want to start their own business or project or whatever that might be, is you don't have to have all the answers at the beginning. Trust your gut, trust your passion, follow the energy, take it one step at a time and trust yourself and know that it's going to take you to a great place. So tell us about Culture Cuppa then. It's been 10 years in the making. How did
Yeah.
it start? How has it evolved? What was the original inception and what did you want to do at the beginning? And has it moved and changed over the years?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So first of all, the company is called Culture Cuppa. And the reason for that is cuppa being a British word for a cup of tea. It resonated with me that the way we drink tea around the world is cultural, whether it's how we drink it with milk, without milk, with sugar, without, with fruits or not, even whether it's a cup or a mug. And so tea for me is something that's very core to my life. I love a good cup of tea, but it was also this idea that cuppa is very cultural. And so that's why the company is called that. But to start off with, the business was very different from what I'm doing today. So initially, the core idea was really around helping people who were relocating to the UK and helping them think about communication and cultural adaptation, really, when they were working either in a UK or a European global headquarters, and how they might think about themselves as a leader of people, perhaps not just British people, but diverse teams. And I was working with people from many different parts of the world, from Brazil, from Japan, from France. So really fascinating insights as well. Not only me obviously helping them, but I also would be learning a lot about their cultures, how they saw the world, how they saw the role of leaders and how teams work. And that was an education in itself. So that was really the beginning. And I did that work primarily face to face. I built up a team to help me to do that. And then, of course, COVID came along, the wonderful days of the coronavirus. Now, obviously, in that moment, relocation really paused. And many people that I'd been working with chose to return, obviously, naturally, to be closer to family and friends in this challenging time. And for me, it led to a bit of a crisis point where my business appeared to be disappearing. And it was that moment where I was like, okay, where do I take this from here? And it could have been easy to give up and say, okay, I gave it a shot. Maybe I need to go get myself a proper job here, go do something else. But the reality was I knew I could still make this work. There was something else. And what I chose to do was move away from focusing just primarily on people who've been relocating to London usually, but think more broadly and understand that in the new world that we were in, this idea of communication, culture, connection was even more important for teams that now were operating fully virtually and remotely and actually had very few opportunities to meet up. Many of the people that I work with sometimes are lucky enough to see their teams once or twice a year, if that. And of course, we have all the amazing collaboration tools to be able to connect in an instant. But my massive philosophy on this is that clearly those collaboration tools, they are technical tools. They don't automatically lead to connection. And that's where you have to be quite intentional in the way that you lean into that connection, in the way that you lean into conversations and create time and space for them. And that's really where my business has evolved to today. Bringing those core threads together, but really thinking about helping people to become global leaders, particularly in that space of leading very diverse virtual teams, helping them to understand how can they bring their people together, but also how do they be the best leader for their people as well.
Yeah, incredible pivot brought on by COVID in this sense that overnight your business had to change and had to evolve, and seeing this opportunity in global communication and how the importance of this interconnected world, but digitally, the role of communication is even more important. And I love your thought around being really intentional with the communication. It's such a lovely thought. How do you think about communication now in the world of AI? Because it's changing again. Do you have thoughts? Do you have principles? Do you have philosophies? What's your thought on the importance of communication in the world of AI?
Obviously, this is the big question. And clearly, there is a lot of investment going in at the moment into developing people's AI skills, their technical skills. But actually, the thing that I see, and it really plays out in the research as well, is that this is the moment when we need to really double down on our human capabilities, in our abilities to be human leaders years. And when you look at research, whether it's from Deloitte, their human capital trends, or Gartner, their research as well, what you can see is that, yes, organizations are looking to develop technical capabilities, but they also recognize for leaders to be effective, they have to be incredibly human in the way that they're operating. And what sits behind being human? Communication, understanding, listening, being able to connect with people. And the book that I've written, that's coming very shortly, the next week, this book has been written now for a number of reasons. But one of those reasons is that I really strongly believe we need these human capabilities more than ever. And what sits in the heart of that is the way that you communicate with people, connect with them, how you understand them culturally.
Could not agree more. My whole philosophy and reason I set up my business is around human storytelling and this fact that the human stories can be so powerful to unlock brand and business growth. And actually, it's human stories that connect us. It creates belonging and meaning and joy and laughter, and this idea of human storytelling. And the very central crux of storytelling is communication. So I couldn't agree with you more. Incredible pivot to now moving to helping people become global leaders. It's been quite a pivotal year for you as well, quite a profound year from creation and loss. And I got a real sense when we spoke last time that actually it's really shifted how you see life, how you see work, and partly inspired and helped you in the completion of your book. Can you tell us a little bit about what has been such a pivotal year for you?
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me to talk about this, because this is an experience that I've had this year. It's not a unique human experience. Of course, many people face this too, which was the loss of my father earlier this year in March. And the reason why I wanted to talk about and share this part of my story is that sometimes death is something we don't talk about. It gets pushed under the carpet, swept aside, and we get on with life. We pretend everything is okay. And my dad had been unwell for a very long time, so it wasn't unexpected. But clearly when it happened, it was a real moment that really got to me, got to my family. We had to pause. We had to come together and really connect again, actually, after his death. But what it brought to my work was that actually when I did come back, and I had to take maybe about 6 weeks out, and I came back into the business, I had to really ask myself a question. When you're faced with death in that way, you have to ask yourself, actually, what is it I'm here to do? Ultimately, we are unfortunately all going to face death at some point, of others, our own. So you have to really ask yourself, is the work that I do worthwhile? Is it changing things? Is it helping other people and making a difference in the world? And the idea that death is part of life made me also realize how important it was for me to finish this book. So although I sat down on that first day and I opened up my screen, and I'd only written probably at that point about 4 or 5 chapters, and I'd only just started to get into the flow, and I looked at it and I thought, I don't know how to continue. I'm not really sure where to go from here. But that idea that ultimately this leaves something and helps other people, that was what drove me. And legacy is really important to me now. It's made me realize how important, even if you don't feel like you have huge impact in the world, each individual person does. Yeah. Every listener listening to this particular episode has impact, whether it's in the world, in the widest sense, whether it's in community or their own personal world, their people around them. Everybody has impact. So I'm going to come back to this word intentional. You have to be intentional in what you're doing, in how you're contributing to that world, the impact you have. And my book, continuing, getting going with it, that was part of legacy for when I'm not here, but it's also dedicated to my dad as well, as that moment of somebody in my roots who really inspired me and helped me understand how important communication and culture was.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because it's obviously such a sad and a difficult and a grieving process to go through. And as you said, we don't talk about it much. It's not a topic that's discussed very often, but it's such a pivotal part of what people and families go through. And the ability to communicate it with us, I'm sure, will have touched many people listening. I'm sure there's many people going through a very similar situation, and I'm sure they will find comfort that you were really able to find clarity in that moment. And it's almost maybe helped you a little bit with the loss, to have your dad as part of the book, have him as the dedication and him being a driving force for the completion of it, and for him to be part of that legacy that you're going to pass on to other people, and the inspiration and the lessons and the guidance that you can give other people through the book. And I've read the dedication, it's beautiful, and I've seen the construct of your book, and I know that people are going to take so many lessons from it, and it's going to be such a guide. So what a beautiful thought that he can be part of that journey, and he's been the one that's spurred you on to complete it and complete the work that you've wanted to do for many years. I know you told me that the book had been on your vision board for many, many years. So well done you for just pulling through what I'm sure is just such a difficult time and turning it into your legacy, which is the book. So wow.
Well, thank you. And I hope for others who are perhaps going through this right now that they also, it's hard when you're in the moment, but if you can find that, what makes this meaningful? What does it mean for my work? How can this mean something that creates impact, that helps other people? Yeah. That's the turning point. And it definitely gave me that motivation, because I said to you, I'd always wanted to write a book. It'd always been in my heart. Yeah. I'd been scribbling stories since I was a little girl and writing little poems. And the idea of creating a book was something I'd always wanted to do. But it's hard. And I'll be really honest, it's really hard. But it is something that is worthwhile when you have that why really clear in your head, when you know the purpose of it, who you're writing it for, but also why it matters in the world as well.
Yeah. And something that really struck me when we were talking about before, I love your challenge around this is not a soft skill. This is a human skill. It's a critical skill. It's a leadership skill, and it is essential. And I loved it when you phrased it like that, because I completely agree. Was that the part of the galvanization for you to say, this is not a soft skill and I want to pass this knowledge on to others? Was that part of it? Because it was beautiful language that you'd shared with me before.
Yes, absolutely. For me, this idea of soft skills, I find deeply frustrating, because it minimizes what is so core, I think, and believe for leaders to be successful globally. But beyond that, this idea of how people think about themselves. Tell a story in the book about somebody I met, and they introduce themselves by their name and their job title, which is a really normal thing to do, right? We introduce ourselves and define ourselves by the job titles. But ultimately, we are more than a job title. And particularly if you are somebody who wants to have impact in the world and to create those ripples, then you are more than what your title says. So this idea of being a human, knowing that your human skills matter. This is why I like to talk about this topic, because we should not be minimizing these skills and prioritizing, say, the technical and AI skills. As important as they are, if we do not have the human skills, then we're lost, because we don't have our human differentiating factor anymore. And this is really important in the world where there is so much challenge around jobs, employability, finding work in a time when there's huge restructures and change going on. But ultimately, if you know what your human differentiating factors are, what makes you unique, and how you contribute and have impact, this is what will make you stand out.
Yeah, I love the idea that human skills, especially in a world of AI, and that communication is the superpower in that world, is such a beautiful thought. So the book's coming out next week. It's called Becoming a Global Leader. It's really talking about the human side of leadership and confidence and clarity and communication. And of course, cultural intelligence, which is such a pivotal part of your business and the Culture Cuppa. Can you talk us through the pillars in the book and tell our listeners how incredible it is and the content that's in there? Because I'm excited for this to launch next week.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura. Well, there are 4 pillars to the book, which are really the foundations, as I see it, of global leader communication. And those 4 pillars are: empower your confidence. So my observation is, working with leaders at all stages of their journey, from early leaders or aspiring leaders all the way through to the most senior levels, is that confidence is a theme that comes up time and time again. So no matter how confident people appear on the outside, there's a lot that goes on in the inside. And that's why I feel it's a really important topic to talk about. So the first pillar, empower your confidence. The second pillar is all about mastering clarity to elevate your influence. So this idea of communicating clearly is not, it sounds so simple, but it's actually really complex. How do you do that? How do you make that happen when we have so many different communication channels, so many different ways that we could communicate, and there's often ending up with massive communication overload? That's why I really believe in communication clarity. And that's the theme for the second pillar. The third pillar is called Bridge Challenging Conversations. So that is because, of course, naturally in any team, in any organizations, challenges come up, and knowing how to approach those kind of conversations is critical. So we do a deep dive in that particular pillar. I share a number of different approaches and ways to think about those types of challenging conversations, and some very practical ways that you can engage in conversations to move forward to find solutions. And then the fourth and the final pillar is all about connect with cultural intelligence. Connection, we've talked about it a lot here today. For me, this has to be the ultimate and final pillar, because we talk in this about human skills. We talk about what happens beyond language, nonverbal communication, and this really important concept of cultural intelligence. How, as a leader, can you lead diverse teams and understand where people are coming from, bring them closer together? So that is a really core part of the cultural intelligence connection pillar. So those are the four pillars. And for me, this book is designed, I wanted to make it very easy to read. I've made it in a way where there are really simple ways for people to take away the key ideas, activation questions for people to reflect further. And there's also a resource book which people can download and do further exercises and reflection points as well. So the idea of it is it's easy to pick up. People can read it from cover to cover or deep dive into what they need right now. And it should, be something that can continue, be with somebody along the journey as well. So yes, I'm incredibly excited to bring this book to the world.
So exciting. And I personally love that your first pillar is about self and about really understanding your confidence and empowering yourself. And that really starts with authenticity and knowing, and a deep self-reflection and awareness and acceptance. And there's such a lovely thought that communication really starts from knowing yourself first and building this sense of authentically you, so that you can communicate in a way that feels really true and really right for you. And I love the first two elements of the first pillar around what's your unique value and what's holding you back. It's so fantastic that it starts with that, because instantly when people talk about communication, they go into who's my stakeholder and how do I influence them and meeting them where they are. But often in communication lessons and in communication books and training courses, they don't often talk about self first. And if you can really get a sense of clarity, as you said, to influence others and this sense of confidence, then everything else becomes easy. So I love the fact that you start the book with self. So thank you for that, because that is so powerful.
Well, I'm glad that really deeply resonated with you, because for me, I really come from this place of it starts with self-leadership. You can't really be influencing others, communicating with others, unless you understand yourself first. And that means understanding who you are, your unique value, yes, your talents, but also understanding how you show up culturally, how you are communicating, expressing yourself, because it's really difficult to see your own culture. It's really difficult to step back and see what's going on. So this is really important part of where it starts. And I'd really encourage everybody to start with that pillar if they can, because that is a great piece in really grounding into your self-leadership before then you think about those next steps of becoming a global leader.
I've had the privilege of having a little sneak peek of the book, so I'm so excited for this to launch next week. Everyone must check it out, because the 4 pillars are so fantastic structures and learning for people, irrespective of the journey that they're on. So thank you so much for that. I'm so excited for this to go out. We are very quickly running out of time, which I'm devastated about. We need a podcast per pillar, because we haven't really gone deep yet. But thank you so much. Please, may I ask you my final question? So we call all of our guests wave makers, because they're making waves on the world. And through this podcast, we want to inspire other people to make their own waves. So what advice would you give to aspiring wave makers? Maybe they're at the start of their career. Maybe they're changing and pivoting direction. Maybe they're a leader that just wants to elevate themselves that one step further. What advice would you give to them?
Wow, there is so much we've talked about in this episode that I could bring to that answer that question. And if I reflect on some of the things we talked about, I think self-leadership is a theme that has come out of our conversation. Really knowing who you are, what is in your heart, what motivates you, the value you can bring to the world, knowing your human differentiating factors and how your skills stand out and what it is that you do to connect with people. These are really important themes and advice I'd give to any of the ripple makers. But also for anybody experiencing change. And I'm sure many listeners are going through big changes right now in the world. I come back to that moment when I changed out of corporate world into running my business and not knowing all the answers, not really having that sense of the big plan, even though I had been that person who was always very planned and structured. Come back to trusting yourself, believing in yourself, knowing that you will find a path, there will be a way. And you'll only realize it when you look back, how far you've come. But it's always hard when you're at the beginning and looking forward and you can't see it. But you have to take that first step and then the next step and the next step. And that would be what I'd really leave with all the wave makers out there.
Victoria Rennoldson, thank you so much for such an open, inspiring, personal, and very wonderful conversation today. Your story reminds us that connection and communication isn't just in what we say, but it's how we say, it's how we connect, it's how we listen to the nuance and then not just the language, but the meaning behind it and how we really lead with humanity. So thank you so much. It's been such a powerful reminder that every ending can actually become an incredible beginning, whether that's COVID, whether that's loss, whether that's pivot, whether that's change of direction, not moving country, that actually you can create incredible legacy within the world from old endings to new beginnings, and that leadership actually is really, really human. And in a world of AI, could not be more importantly human. So thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. Amazing, deeply thoughtful questions. And I've absolutely loved this conversation as well. So thank you so much.
Me too. All the very best with the book, because I'm so excited for it to launch.
Thank
for
you.
Everyone listening and watching, don't forget Victoria's book, Becoming a Global Leader. It's out on Monday, so look out for that. I've had a sneak peek and it's full of wisdom for anyone who wants to lead with confidence, clarity, and culture intelligence. And if you're looking to elevate the human storytelling of your brand, please get in touch with us at The Ripple Impact so we can see how we can elevate your storytelling and your business. That is a wrap on this Ripple episode. Don't forget to subscribe and tune in weekly for more bold voices just like Victoria's and inspiring wavemaker guests. I'm Laura Barber. This is The Ripple Impact. Victoria, thank you so, so much. For everyone else, we will see you next week. Thanks, Victoria.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.